Your car doesn't fall apart overnight. It happens slowly through small habits repeated over thousands of kilometers. Maybe you think driving on low fuel isn't a big deal, or that resting your hand on the gear lever is just something everybody does. But each of these habits chips away your car's health one part at a time. Welcome to White Metal. In this video, we'll talk about 7 habits that might seem harmless but could be costing you in performance, reliability, and money. And once you see the damage they do, you'll never drive the same. Most drivers think it's harmless to run on low fuel every now and then. You've probably seen the fuel light come on and thought, it's fine, I've got 50 more kilometers of range left. But what you may not realize is that driving frequently on low fuel is slowly damaging your car's heart, its fuel system. Let's start with the fuel pump. In most modern cars, it's an electric pump mounted inside the fuel tank, fully submerged in fuel. It draws fuel from the bottom of the tank and sends it to the engine under high pressure. But the fuel isn't just there to power the engine. It also cools and lubricates the pump. When your tank is nearly empty, the pump becomes less submerged, especially while turning and driving on inclines. With less fuel surrounding it, the pump overheats, wears out faster, and risks premature failure. And let me tell you, a new one is not cheap. Then there's the issue of sediment and debris. Over time, small amounts of rust, dust, and even microbial residue collect at the bottom of the tank. When your fuel is low, there isn't enough liquid mass to keep that settled debris undisturbed. As the car moves, the remaining fuel sloshes around, stirring up that dirt, and the fuel pump ends up sucking it right in. This can clog the fuel filter, strain the pump, and send abrasive particles towards the injectors, reducing performance and increasing long-term wear. And if you're in a diesel car, it's even worse. Diesel systems need consistent pressure and are far less forgiving of air bubbles or contamination. Running low can introduce air into the fuel lines, making the engine harder to start and potentially damaging sensitive components. So what's the right thing to do? Keep your tank at least 25% fuel at all times. It's not just about convenience, it's about keeping the fuel tank protected, your injectors clean, and combustion smooth. It's a tiny habit that can save you tens of thousands of rupees in the long run and a whole lot of trouble. The clutch is one of the most abused components in a manual car, and riding the clutch is one of the most common and damaging habits. In heavy traffic conditions, drivers often hold the clutch pedal halfway down because it gives them better control. But what it really does is slowly destroy the clutch system. So here's what's actually happening. The engine spins the flywheel, and the clutch disc, which is connected to the gearbox, sits between the flywheel and the pressure plate. When the clutch pedal is fully released, the pressure plate presses the disc firmly against the flywheel. Everything spins together at the same speed, and that is full engagement, and power flows smoothly to the wheels. When the pedal is fully pressed, the pressure plate pulls back, the clutch disc separates from the flywheel, and power stops flowing. That is full disengagement. But when you hold the clutch halfway down, the disc is still in contact but slipping. It's not fully locked in, so it grinds slightly against the flywheel. That's what we call riding the clutch. And that constant slipping creates heat, wears out the friction material, and eventually causes clutch failure. It can also overheat the flywheel and wear out the release bearing. During takeoff and in slow traffic, brief half-clutch use is necessary to avoid stalling. But the mistake is holding it in that zone for too long, or worse, using the clutch to control your speed instead of the brakes. Even lightly resting your foot on the clutch pedal can cause damage. So what's the right way to drive? Use the clutch only to get moving, then release it completely. In bumper-to-bumper traffic, try to let the car roll forward using engine idle torque with the clutch fully engaged, instead of feathering it constantly. If you're stopped for more than a few seconds, shift to neutral and take your foot off the clutch pedal. And on inclines, don't rely on half clutch to hold your position. Use the handbrake to prevent rollback, then release it smoothly as you engage the clutch and throttle. Driving smoothly and giving the clutch proper rest can extend its life dramatically, saving you money and giving you a more responsive car in the long run. Resting your hand on the gear lever might seem like a harmless habit, especially in slow traffic or during a long cruise. But in a manual transmission car, this small habit is quietly damaging your gearbox. The gear lever in a manual car is connected to moving parts inside the gearbox. When you shift, it moves the selective fork, which slides a synchronizer ring to engage the gear. And once you're in gear, these parts are meant to stay still. But when you rest your hand on the lever, you apply a slight pressure that travels down into the gearbox and keeps the selective fork pressed against the synchronizer. Over time, this causes wear on the selective fork, damage to the synchronizer ring, and even misalignment, which can make shifting harder or cause the gear to slip out. These components are usually made of soft metals like aluminum or brass, and they are not designed to handle constant pressure. Even a light touch held long enough can lead to expensive damage later on. So if you're driving a manual, just take your hand off the gear lever after shifting. Leave it alone and let your gearbox do its job. When we say ignoring a pothole or a speed bump, we don't mean you didn't see it. We mean you did not slow down. You drove over it at speed without easing off on the throttle or braking, assuming your car can take it. This is a very common habit, especially on Indian roads, and over time it can quietly do serious damage to your car. Every time you hit a pothole or jump a speed bump too fast, the shock is transferred directly into your suspension. The shock absorbers, struts, coil springs, control arms, and rubber bushings. These components are designed to handle rough patches but not high-speed vertical impacts. Repeated abuse can lead to worn-out dampers, cracked bushings, and loose steering feel. It doesn't stop there. A hard hit can also knock your wheel alignment out of spec, causing uneven tire wear, reduced fuel efficiency, and poor handling. In many cases, it even damages the tires themselves. You might see sidewall bulges or slow punctures later on. And if the hit is sharp enough, your alloy wheels can bend or crack, especially on lower profile tires. Now, you might think, I drive a compact SUV. It's built for this stuff. But that's only half true. Mass market SUVs like Creta, Nexon, Sonnet or Brezza do have a higher ground clearance and a slightly stiffer suspension tuning, which helps with bad roads. But underneath, they still use monocoque platforms and suspension parts that are not much stronger than those in hatchbacks or sedans. Most even share components across models. So while they might handle a bump better than a sedan, they're not built for careless punishment. The damage still builds up, just a little more slowly. So what's the takeaway? Slow down. Let the suspension do its job, not take the hit. Brake before the bump, not on it, and go over gently. If it's a pothole you cannot avoid, roll through slowly and diagonally to spread the impact. A lot of car owners believe that if their vehicle feels fine, there's no need to service it. But that's a costly mistake. Scheduled servicing isn't just about fixing problems, it's about preventing them. And skipping it is one of the easiest ways to shorten your car's lifespan. So what really happens during a typical service appointment? It's more than just an oil change. The engine oil and oil filter are replaced to keep the engine clean and lubricated. Air filters and fuel filters are checked or swapped to maintain efficient combustion. Brake pads, discs, and fluid are inspected to ensure consistent stopping power. Coolant and transmission fluid levels are topped up or replaced to prevent overheating and gear wear. Mechanics also check belts, hoses, suspension components, battery health, and tire wear. None of these things scream for attention on their own, but leave them unchecked and they quietly cause damage. For example, old oil turns acidic and forms sludge, which clogs oil passages and wears down the engine from the inside. Brake fluid absorbs moisture, which reduces braking power and corrodes internal brake lines. A worn accessory belt might not show any symptoms at all until it snaps and suddenly you lose power steering, battery charging, or even cooling. Even if you don't drive much, fluids degrade with time, not just with kilometers. So skipping a yearly service just because your car feels fine is like skipping a health checkup just because you don't feel sick. And your car's resale value depends heavily on your service history. Buyers and inspectors look for consistent records, and if they see gaps, they assume the car was neglected. So here's the rule. Follow the service schedule in your owner's manual, regardless of how the car feels. Preventive care always costs less than a breakdown, and it keeps your car running smoother, longer, and safer. It's easy to ignore a warning light on the dashboard, especially if the car still feels fine. But modern cars are full of sensors for a reason. When one of those lights turns on, whether it's the check engine light, oil pressure, coolant temperature, battery or brakes, it means something isn't operating as it should and the car is trying to warn you before things go wrong. Ignoring a check engine light could mean letting a small sensor fault escalate into a fuel system or catalytic converter damage. Ignoring the oil pressure light could mean minutes away from engine seizure. And those occasional flickers? Still a sign, not a glitch. Even tire pressure warnings, if left unchecked, can lead to premature wear or a sudden blowout. But it's not just lights. Your car often speaks in subtler ways, through sounds, vibrations, and feel. A squeal, a knock, a grind, or even a slight delay in response, these are early signs that something mechanical is wearing out or out of spec. It could be something as small as a worn brake pad or something as serious as a failing engine mount. And just like with warning lights, the earlier you catch them, the cheaper and easier it is to fix. These signs don't fix themselves. They get worse and more expensive. What starts as a soft noise can end in a breakdown. What feels like a minor shake can lead to a component failure. So here's the takeaway. Your car warns you, both visibly and audibly. The smart thing is to listen. Most drivers assume that if the engine starts fine, it's ready to go. But revving or accelerating hard immediately after startup is one of the fastest ways to wear your engine out. A cold engine doesn't mean freezing conditions. It just means the engine hasn't yet reached its optimal operating temperature, which is typically around 90 to 105 degrees Celsius. Until then, things under the hood aren't quite ready. The engine oil is still thick, hasn't fully circulated, and cannot form a proper lubricating film between moving parts. And because metals expand with heat, components like pistons, bearings, and cylinder walls are still slightly contracted. So the tolerances inside the engine are not where they should be, leading to increased friction, rougher contact, and faster wear. Now, if you start revving this engine at this point, things get worse. Higher RPM puts more load on the crankshaft, the pistons, the valve train, all while they're still cold and poorly lubricated. And if your car has a turbocharger, the risk is even higher. The turbo spins at over 100,000 RPM and its bearings rely completely on engine oil delivered under pressure for lubrication. If you rev before the oil reaches them, you're spinning dry metal at jet engine speeds. And that kind of stress can lead to early turbo failure. So what's the right thing to do? After starting the car, let it idle for 20 to 30 seconds, just enough for the oil to begin circulating. Then drive off gently. Avoid sudden acceleration and high revs until the temperature gauge settles near the middle. Once the engine is warm, it's ready to give you all the performance it was designed for without any damage. It's the small habits that quietly do the most damage. Riding the clutch, skipping service, revving a cold engine. They don't hurt right away, but over time, they wear your car down. A little awareness can save you a lot of money and a lot of regret. If you think maintenance is expensive, try neglect. Thank you for watching. If you liked this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more content like this. See you in the next video.